So before we get into the techniques, I want to talk a little bit about a couple other things. One is mindset. You know, there's no guarantee you're going to catch anything when you go out, so that shouldn't be your mindset that you have to catch something. Instead, it's just about getting out, getting outside. If you catch something, that's great. If not, still, you've had the fun of getting outside and having some outside activities. Now, so the next thing is I want to talk a little bit about strategy for bank fishing. Where we are right now is a pond that's pretty close to me. It's next to a golf course where they don't mind you fishing. So let me pan this around. It's a pretty good sized pond. And I've fished here a lot since it's handy. It's a nice sized pond, and it gets fished a lot. So there aren't a lot of fish in here, but I've caught some nice fish in this area. So when you're selecting a body of water to fish, if you can find a pond or a area off a slow moving river or a small lake, something like that, then the nice thing about that is that the fish are more concentrated. So for bank fishing, it's a little easier to find. So when you go to a body of water and you're getting ready to fish, pardon the traffic noise, and you're getting ready to fish, what you want to do is look for what they call in fishing structure. How this works is that your predatory fish like largemouth bass, walleye, perch, crappie, they're looking for bait fish. The small minnows, small fish. Well, if you think about being a small fish, you want a place to hide. And the places to hide are what are called structure. So if you look here, you'll see this is close to a little spillway. And you can see the concrete around it. Now that's pretty much straight, so it doesn't necessarily provide structure, but I can tell you that since this is a little small river, a stream that flows through this area, that at this spillway, lots of stuff gets jammed up. It floats down. It could be some branches that have fallen off of a tree, or somebody threw out a Christmas tree someplace, or something else. And what will happen here is that it floats down and then it hits this wall and stops. So down below the surface, I can attest, is stuff down there, because when I'm fishing I can feel it. Occasionally I get even hung up on something. So that's one thing you want to do. Then, so look around, see if you can find some structure. Let me pan around here a minute. Now what you'll notice is the vast bulk of most bodies of water, it's just plain water. And if you imagine the bottom is fairly nondescript. But if you look here, see if I can zoom in on this. There's a piece of concrete. Looks like there used to be some kind of a ramp or something here. Now that's not a whole lot of structure, but it is something. And you can't see it in here, but there's some more concrete that goes up to the bank. Well, guess what? That's a good place for the little minnows to hang out and hide. And I've caught some bass and bluegill in that area. So look for things that a little break in the action. Also, you can't see this too well here. Let's see if I can zoom in some more. Right down there are some trees right next to the bank, and the thing about it is the roots of those trees go out into the water. And so that's another place where you might look. You can also look at points. I like I said, you can't see this too well, but right around in there, there's kind of a little peninsula that shoots out. And so fish will hang out around that. The larger fish will maybe be in deeper water, and then they'll zoom in and get the bait fish. And then also, you can't see this too well, but right over there is another small spillway. And right about there is a little peninsula, and that's been a great spot to catch fish because the larger fish will hang out below the spillway, particularly after there's been a little rain, and catch anything that comes down the spillway. Maybe some minnows get washed over or what. So what you're looking for are breaks in the action, so to speak. Rocks, limbs. If there's a deep spot someplace, might be some brush piles, overhanging limbs, overhanging trees are good, particularly in the summer. So like over here, there's some trees overhanging the water. And in the summer when it's really hot, this will be a shaded area. So the fish, maybe they're getting a little hot and they'll hang out in the shade or on the edges of the shade. So if you can, find ponds that are small lakes that aren't too big, that have some things of interest in there, and then you can try fishing those. That's a good starting point. Doesn't mean you can't catch fish in other areas, plain areas. It's just they're probably not as concentrated. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is talk about the gear. Before we get into the casting demo, I want to talk a little bit about the gear. So I've showed you this reel, it's open-faced spinning reel, and I choose one that's a little bigger than normally what people use for ultralight. Usually they're smaller with a smaller spool, but what I found is that with the smaller spool you can tend to get little tighter coils. And since monofilament has a memory to it, I don't think that's optimal. So I go with a little bit bigger reel than normally. Has a little bigger spool, so it tends to get less memory and cause problems. Now the line, I like to use 4-pound monofilament line. I don't use copolymer, which is real popular now because copolymer really does get a tendency to get memory. That's where you'll see the twists come off your line. So I stick with nylon monofilament, 4-pound. And the reason why I like 4-pound test is that I can throw, I don't know, probably can't see this right now, but I've got the little baby shad on here with a 1/32 ounce weight. The nice thing about that is with this line, it's light enough that I can get some good distance with these lighter baits. If you go heavier than that, it's going to cut down on your distance. It's okay to do that, but just keep that in mind. This reel also you can readily put on heavier line like 6-pound or 8-pound, and it works fine. You just, if you're using the lightweight, just recognize that you're going to get less distance with it. Now there's different monofilaments out there. This is one called S.O.S, I think it is, which I really like. I've tried some of the other ones. Trilene is a popular one, Strand, and they're good. I just like this one. It has kind of a greenish tint to it, so it disappears in the water real well. Okay, now the rod. Okay, this rod is 7 foot long. It's a ultralight, fast action rod, and I've tried a bunch of combinations. I had some reels in the past, and I bought 2 or 3, took some of them back, and this one, ironically, was the cheapest. I got it first at Walmart, and I just like it the best. It's got a 7 foot, so you get a good length to it. So you get some leverage with that. It's ultralight, so it's designed for lighter weight fishing, and it's fast action. Now what that means is that there's a variation of stiffness along this rod. I don't know if you can see it this way. What fast action means is that the tip, you get most of your flex in the tip. Now a medium action or whatever, this will be stiff too, so it's gonna flex almost as a whole, but you don't get much action at the tip. And then ultra fast action, it's really stiff the whole way, and you get just a little bit at the end. What I found was that this is a good combination, because what you want to do is you want the rod to give you some whip as you're casting it out. So you load up the weight and then you flip it out, and so the fast action gives you a little whip at the end, gets you a little extra distance. So that's the gear. Now let's do some fishing. Okay, before I start fishing, the first thing I do is check the drag. So I'll pull on here, see if it'll peel off, if the spool will spin and peel it off. You want to do that first, because if you catch a fish, you want to make sure your drag's set right. And then there's a little knob here on the top where you can adjust the drag. So get it where you feel pretty good, takes a pretty good pull to get it out. You don't want it to just come out real easy. And then so your drag is set. Now, there are different ways to cast your baits. Most of the time, if my cast is unimpeded, like trees behind or something like that, be sure and watch for that, because I've normally look around if I'm in some trees to make sure that I'm not going to hit a tree going back, but I forget sometimes. So, check that out. So for me, the normal cast, which is the most accurate, is, I guess, called the overhand cast. So what you do is you set your bait. I'm using the little baby shad on here to start with. That's usually what I do. Set your bait, I like about 6 to 8 inches from the end. And go ahead and flip your bail. And then what you want to do with overhand cast is just move it at your elbow. This is not like a full arm thing like that. You just move at the elbow and wrist. So it's kind of a whipping action. And then it'll take practice, but then at some point you let go of the line and the bait goes out. And probably not going to catch anything today. We just had a big rain, and it's like the water's real murky, but I wanted to show you how all this works. So that's the first cast. So I reel in about, so far, about, 8 inches, foot, and then roll your bail back, like I showed in the other video, and then overhand cast. This is accurate because you're going in a straight line. You can look at your target and then just throw it out. Now what you're trying to do here is, this is where it takes practice and getting a feel for it, is that you'll start to feel when you bring it back, if you bring it back fast enough, you'll feel it kind of load up at the top. That's where the rod is bending back with the weight. That can be subtle with these light weights, but you'll get a feel for it. So you load it up, and then you bring it forward and release your line like that. Now the other ways that you can cast this is, if you're in some trees or it's impeded this way, you can do side cast, same thing, side cast. You can even, you can even let some line out a ways, maybe 4 feet. So it's hanging down here like this. Flip your bail and then just do a flip. So if you're really in a tight area and you don't need to get it out there very far, you can do that. Okay, so those are the ways you can cast. Now let's get into the presentation part of it, how you present your bait to the fish. So first I'm gonna talk about the swim rig that I talked about in the other video. So you cast your bait out. Now usually what I'll do is just let it sink to the bottom. Typically, the fish are going to suspend off the bottom, and so you want to fish your bait just up in that area. So I'll throw it out, I'll let it sink, and then for the swimming action, I'll just barely twitch the end of the rod. You probably can't see it. I'll just barely switch it. Son of a gun, how about that? Told you this was a good lure. Now what I'm going to do here, this is a small bass, so I'm just going to lift it out of the water. I'll talk about another way to do that. Grab it by the lip. Got him in the lip, so I can just take it out like that and throw him back. Always catch and release. So I told you that was effective. So throw it out. Let it sink. I promise you I didn't bribe that fish to grab the line. Just twitch it. Twitch, twitch, twitch. Now one reason why I think that lure worked in these waters right now, they're pretty murky, is that it has this black on top. Which, if the waters are murky, you probably want to go with the darker colors, because they can see those better. So like the dark worms or the dark TRDs. If the water's pretty clear, then I like to use the green pumpkin, something lighter color. Well, while I'm at it, let me talk about landing that fish. You saw what I did. It was a small bass, so I can just lift it out of the water with the rod and grab it. Now this is 4-pound test line, and then your knot is going to be just a tiny bit weaker than the line. So if you get a bigger fish, then you don't want to, if you get a 2-pound fish or something like that, you'll know when it's a strain to lift it out. You don't want to lift it out with the rod. And if it's a really big fish, or you don't want to do that, what you do is just get out on your knee, take a knee and reach in, and you'll grab the lip of the fish with your thumb on top and lift it out. That way you can protect your line. Now if it's a fish that's got a lot of sharp teeth in it, which largemouth bass, bluegill, crappie, they're fine, but if you have something, a northern pike or maybe a walleye, and you don't want to get your hand in there, you can go underneath the fish and grab it that way. So another way I fish the swim rig, you can just throw it out like I said, and then just reel it in and twitch it. I don't know if you can see me do that. I'm just barely twitching the end. So you can get it towards the shore and look down at your bait where its water's clear enough and see what is, oh, golly. Oh, this is amazing. Amazing. So I'll just lift it out. This is why I like using the ultralight rig. This is not a monster, but wow, that was fun. It's fun to catch. And even with these little miniature shad, you can catch, I've caught pound and a half bass on it. In you go. Now, I also want to mention something here. So, if you're catching fish, catch a few fish on a particular setup, what you want to do is, I was talking about teeth a little earlier. Well, largemouth bass, all these fish have little teeth in them at least. So if you've caught a few fish on your particular setup, just take the line and rub it with your fingers right near the hook and see if it's abraded. Because over time, if you're catching fish, the teeth can abrade the line and weaken it. Now, monofilament's great. It'll, even with a few abrades, it's still very strong. So it'll still be good to go. But check that. So the other way I fish it is throw it out. This is a swim setup. And I'll swim it in a little bit, like I said, and then let it drop and sit. Jig it in. There's another one. Good Lord. All right, this is a good point to talk about the setting the hook. You're gonna get a feel for when there's a fish on line. So I just felt a little tug, a little bump on my line, and so when you feel that, you know, your natural tendency is just to jerk. Okay, you don't want to do that. You want to wait just a couple heartbeats, a little bit. Reel it in, drop it. Reel it in, drop it. So what happened that time was when I dropped it and let it sit there, I felt the line bump a little bit. So I knew that there was a fish interested in it. But I waited. Let's see now, is that really a fish? Because if it is a fish, you're going to feel it, it's going to get more exaggerated. Now, to set the hook, what you want to do is not just wham, not just jerk like crazy. You don't need to do that. These hooks are really sharp, so you don't need to do that. What you want to do instead is just sweep the rod. You can sweep it either way. So let me demonstrate. So I'm out there, jig and stop, jig and stop. I feel a fish get on line, and I just sweep it about like that. You don't need to really jerk it hard. You don't want to do that really. Yeah, let's see if we can demonstrate it over here. So you can sweep it either way. You can go up like this if that's comfortable. Here I'm kind of facing that way, so to the left worked, or if you're fishing this way, you can sweep it to the right. So you just sweep the rod. You don't need to jerk it, and that'll be fine. So that's for the swim rig. Now with the little fishies, it's a little different. You can still do that. You can still use that same technique, but with the little fishies, they have their own action. So usually what I'll do there is just reel them in, because they've got that tail that's going to jiggle around. Okay, let's see here. Okay, now I've got on the drop shot rig. So I've got about a foot here, got my swivel on top, and I've rigged this with a wacky rig. So used a worm and just poked through it about midways. Now this one is a little different in that, as you can see, I've got a lot below the tip of the rod. Hopefully you can see that. So it's a little more challenging in the sense of doing this. Now I do it because I'm used to it. Roll it back. I can feel it load up. Feel it load up and then cast it out like that. Well, let me just reel that in. If that's difficult for you, with this particular rig there is an option that's fine. It's just not quite as efficient. You don't get quite the distance. But if that's a little hard to gauge, you can just swing it around like this and then throw it out. Just got to make sure you don't have any trees or anything back there. So with the drop shot rig, I just throw it out there and let it sit for a little bit. This is all pretty much the same with all of them, except for the drop shot rig is the bait's suspended above the bottom. So let it sit, raise it up, and now when you do that, you want to reel in the slack line when you bring the rod down. That way you don't disturb the bait. So raise it up, reel it in. That way when you bring the rod tip down, what you want to do you've got the slack out of it in case you need to set the hook. Raise it up, drop it down. So that's one way. That's a common way it's used, like that. But like the other rigs, and I'm going to use this for the shaky head and the Ned rig as well, because they're all the action's basically the same. So what I'm doing here, cut the line down here, roll it up. I look at it when it gets pretty close to where I want it. Back reel the bail and lift it open. I'll throw it out. Okay, so these are the different kinds of things you can do with this one, the Ned rig, the Nico rig, and even the swim rig if you're fishing it like this. So you let it sit. You can raise it up, drop it down, reel in. You can. This is one I use a lot. I've got it down here and I just jerk it up. So kind of jumping along the bottom, reel in, jerk it up. Gives a lot of action, particularly with this wacky rig. Let it sit, raise it up, drop it down, jerk it in like so, let it sit. So with the Ned rig, same thing. Throw it out, let it sit, raise it up, drop it, hop it a ways, let it sit. You can even swim them if you want to. I don't do that very often, but throw it out. But sometimes you want to get the fish's attention, so I'll just swim it and jerk it a little bit like that for ways, and then drop it down. You can mix and match. What you're trying to do is jerk it. What you're trying to do is find something that appeals to the fish so that it attracts them. And it could be various things. It could be swimming something, like with the little fishy. It could be just letting it sit. Sometimes fish are inactive, and you just let it sit for a long period of time. Maybe, so let's say you're using a TRD, that drop of the Ned rig. Throw it out there, you let it sit for a long time. Maybe you don't even reel it in, you just kind of twitch it just a little bit, right on spot, and then leave it. Reel in your slack. So what you're trying to do is just try to find a presentation that's going to work. Now, fishing at this spot reminded me of something I also want to mention about 4-pound test line. Don't think you can't catch big fish on 4-pound test line. You certainly can, and I have. And what reminded me was this spot here. One day I was out here and I was fishing. I was throwing my lure right over here. Sometimes if you fish next to what you're looking for is structure to fish to. Could be that piece of concrete I showed you, or in this case I knew that stuff had washed up against this wall because I'd gotten snagged a couple times there. So I was fishing right over there, and I thought I got hung up because I couldn't reel anymore. My line seemed snagged, and so I'm playing around with it. I'll show you that in a minute. Couldn't get it loose. So I was about to break my line, and all of a sudden it took off, headed out that way. And whoa, wait a minute now. And my pole just went boom, like that. And so I'm starting to reel, trying to reel it in. I'd reel in a little bit, and then the drag would kick in. It'd peel out when the fish took off. Take off a ways, turn around, I'd reel it in. It'd peel out, I'd reel it in. Well, this went on for about 7 or 8 minutes. It took me a long time. Fish would take off and peel out, I'd reel it in, and finally the fish got tired and I was able to reel it in. And when I got it to the bank, it was like a 15-pound carp. Huge, huge fish. 4-pound test line. So as long as you get your drag set right, you can catch plenty of good fish. Okay? Now, here's what I want to talk about problems, because every fisherman gets them and you need to know how to deal with them. Well, the first problem with all reels these types, your closed face spinning reels, your bait casters, every now and then the line's going to get wadded up on you. With bait casters, it's called it's a backlash. These, you might call it a nest, whatever. So with these, what happens is, this particularly happens if you're having to cast into the wind, where the wind hits it, kind of stalls it out, is you'll get a spool of kind of loops and stuff that come off, maybe go out a ways. And this is particularly true if you've gotten a little line twist in your line. So what do? Well, what you can do is just get it where you can work on it, this little nest, and see if you can work it out. Most of the time you can. If it's not too bad, you can just kind of play with the mess and work it out and straighten it out. If you can't, then all you do is just let the line come out beyond the, if you've got some good line coming out, straight line coming out here, let the line come out and just cut it off and by hand bring in your bait. And then take your bait off and put the mess in your pocket so that the ducks and stuff don't get messed up with it, and retie. That's not a big deal because you got a lot of line on here and you'll have plenty of line to work with. So if you get a nest, that's what you got to do. The next thing is if you get hung up, and you will get hung up. I mean, there's no two ways about it. These lures have sharp hooks on them, and you're going to be fishing around areas where you may not see it, but there's some branches below the surface, and you're going to get hung up. And you'll know it because you'll stop reeling, you can feel it. So what do you do then? Well, there's a couple things you can try. The first thing I like to do, since I'm fishing on the bank, is say I'm fishing over here, got it out there like that. Yeah, that's a poor example. Let me try it over here. Let's say I'm right out here in front of me fishing, and I get hung up. One thing you should try, this is the least invasive of all of it, is just walk down the bank, kind of try to go opposite where it's hung up. So if I hung up over there, or if I hung up over there, I'll walk to the other side and see if I can pull it loose. And a lot of times you can, particularly if it's hung up in the rocks. Another thing you can do, since I'm not hung up, this is going to be a little bit hard to demo, but another thing you can try is you pull the line nice and, get it nice and, before I mention something, before I finish that, when you get hung, do not just start pulling like crazy. That can make it worse. So wait a second. Try some of these. So you pull the line until it's tight. You point your rod towards your snag, and then you let it go, and it'll go like that. So you pull that, and it'll shoot out there. Sometimes that'll get it loose. So you can try all those things. If nothing works, then you're going to have to break your line. So what the thing you do not want to do is try to break your line using your rod. Pull it real hard like that, and the rod's going like that, because you could break your rod. These are ultralight rods, so you don't want to do that. Instead, what you do is this. You reel in, you point the rod tip towards your snag. I'm going to do it on this side. Normally I do it over here, but turn your head away and then start walking backwards and feel. You want to turn your head away because it's unlikely, but just in the off chance it comes shooting out of there, you don't want it to hit you in the face. Keep your tip down, like that's another thing. Keep your tip down, so or try to, and then just walk back until it breaks. So let's see, what other problems are you going to have? Let's see if I walk around. That's about it on the problems. You'll learn as you're fishing what to deal with them. But So that's the, let's see if there's anything else I was gonna say. Okay, so drop-offs, yes, hang-ups. So all of these, so what I've shown with these techniques basically is everything except the swim rig. You throw it out, let it sit, and bump it along or raise it up. Just try different things. You can, you also want to try different depths. You can adjust with the drop shot. You can adjust your depth above the bottom, get it close or get it further away. Just try it like this, and I'm just swimming this along. This is a drop shot rig, but I'm just going to swim it along with a little twitch, kind of like a swim bait. And see if I can catch a big fish. Not today, not with this one, just caught those little ones. Okay, I think I've covered pretty much everything. All right, that's it. Listen, enjoy getting out, have fun with it, even if you don't catch anything. You're outside, you're in the sun, you're next to water. What can be better than that? So have fun fishing. See you later.